Welcome, ACPS families and students. Thank you for joining us. In order to ensure that all are able to access this presentation in their preferred language, we are providing simultaneous interpretation in Spanish, Amharic, and Arabic today. After the interpreters have provided their instructions, please press the globe icon in Zoom that will appear at the bottom of your computer screen and select your preferred language. If you are watching on a phone, press the 3 dots at the bottom right of your screen and then select your preferred language. Thank you. Now, I'd like our interpreters to give instructions, starting with Spanish, then Amharic, and then Arabic. Spanish, please provide your instructions for interpretation.
Gracias por estar con nosotros hoy para darle acceso a esta presentación. Les ofrecemos esta presentación en español y en árabe después de que cada intérprete haya proveído sus instrucciones en su idioma. Ustedes pueden cliquear en el globo al final, al bajo de la pantalla y seleccionen español para español. Si están utilizando un teléfono, hay un sitio donde pueden cliquear en los 3 puntos y ahí entonces seleccionan español. Muchas gracias.
እንኳን ደህና መጣችሁ የኤሲፒኤስ ቤተሰቦችና ተማሪዎች አብራችሁን ዛሬ ስላላችሁ በጣም ደስ ብሎናል። እንግዲህ በራሳችሁ ቋንቋ የትርጉምን አገልግሎት እንድታገኙ የተለያዩ ቋንቋዎች በስፓኒሽኛ በአማርኛና በአረብኛ ትርጉም እየተሰጠ ነው ያለው። የአማርኛ ትርጉም ለምትፈልጉ የዓለም ቅርጽ ያለበትን ታች ላይ ታገኛላችሁ። እሱን በመጫን አማርኛ የሚለውን በመምረጥ የአማርኛ ትርጉምን ማግኘት ትችላላችሁ። Thank you.
مرحبا أهالي وطلاب مدارس مدينة ألكسندريا. احنا بنشكركم على حضوركم معنا وانضمام إلينا في هذه المناقشة. كرمال أنه نعرف أنه الأهالي جميعا يسمعون باللغات التي يرغبونها، توفرنا بهذه الجلسة الترجمة باللغات الإسبانيولية والأمهارك والعربية. إذا أنتم كنتوا عم تحضرونا من الكمبيوتر، فالرجاء أنكم تضغطوا على إشارة الكرة الأرضية اللي تحت تتواجد بأسفل الشاشة عندكم لكي تختاروا اللغة العربية. وإذا كنتوا عم تسمعونا عم تحضرونا من خلال التليفون، ممكن تشوفوا النقاط الثلاثة اللي على الجانب اليمين من شاشة التليفون لتضغطوا على اللغة العربية، تختاروا اللغة العربية لاستماع هذه المناقشة باللغة العربية. وشكرا مرة ثانية.
Now, let's welcome Jefferson Houston student and school board representative, Giselle, who will introduce our hosts and panelists.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome families to the Identity Project Mori Family Forum. As you heard, my name is Giselle Hughes. I'm an 8th grader here in ACPS, and I'm one of the middle school representatives on the ACPS school board. I would like to introduce you all to our panelists, Dr. Michelle Reif, an ACPS school board member from District A, Fran Bowler, President of the Matthew Mori Elementary School PTA, and our Superintendent, Dr. Gregory Hutchings. We're looking forward to a really engaging discussion this evening, and thanks again for joining us.
Thank you, Giselle, for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone, and good evening. My name is Michelle Reif, and I am a member of the Alexandria School Board. I also serve as the school board's liaison to Matthew Mori Elementary School, and I'd like to welcome you this evening. Tonight's event is part of the Identity Project, which is a community engagement initiative led by ACPS in response to 2 petitions that were submitted to the school board in the past couple of months, requesting that we rename T.C. Williams High School and Matthew Mori Elementary School. The school board is going to be holding a virtual public hearing on this topic this Thursday, October 29th at 4:00 p.m. And members of the public are invited to sign up to speak on our ACPS website. If you just go under the school board meetings tab, you will find more information. There's also a survey that you can find online on our website, which will be open until midnight on Wednesday evening. And the school board is going to be voting on whether or not to rename these two schools on Monday, November 23rd. So this forum is part of a series of community conversations, student discussions, and read-ins. And we wanted to have a special forum specifically to hear from the students of Matthew Morey and their families about this issue. So I would like to thank everyone for participating this evening. You can watch past sessions on the ACPS website if you go there and search for the Identity Project. And I'm happy to be joined tonight by Morey's PTA President, Fran Buller. I do want to acknowledge that Dr. Hutchings is also, our superintendent, is also listening in, and he will be giving some final remarks at the end of our conversation. We have a series of questions, and Fran and I are going to take turns asking those questions, posing them. But before we get into that, we have a short video that has been produced by ACPS about the man, Matthew Morey, that the school is named after. So at this time, we're going to show the video, and then we will get into the questions.
Alexandria was part of the southern United States of America. 11 of the states seceded from the U.S. and formed the Confederate States of America after Abraham Lincoln won the election of 1860. At the outbreak of the Civil War in the spring of 1861, Virginia sided with the Confederate Army. Within days of seceding from the Union, federal troops arrived in Alexandria to take possession of the city. The first major incident of the Civil War happened at the Marshall House opposite City Hall in Old Town. The city was a critical supply hub for the Federal Army as troops and supplies were transported to key battlegrounds in the South via railroad from Alexandria. Wounded soldiers were brought back on the trains, and many buildings in the city were converted into hospitals. Several forts were constructed in Alexandria as a part of the defense of the city of Washington. During the Civil War, African Americans who lived in the South flooded into Union-controlled areas, including Alexandria. Some worked for the Union Army, but others died of poverty. Many were buried at the Contrabands and Freedmen Cemetery. In the 1920s, during the era of Jim Crow segregation, the cult of the lost cause was created as the South searched for justification for its loss and its need to find a substitute for victory in the Civil War. In attempting to deal with defeat, Southerners created an image of the war as an heroic epic. To celebrate the Confederacy, places were named after people they viewed as Confederate heroes. A statue was put up in Old Town, and highways and streets were named after Confederate leaders. Matthew Morey was an oceanographer who had helped to make the seas safer for navigation. He was an architect of the 1861 Peace Conference in Washington, which failed to hold the Union together. Morey then resigned his commission and took a boat across the Potomac River to Alexandria and offered his services to Virginia. He was appointed to a 3-man advisory council overseeing the state's military preparations. Morey's primary contributions to the Confederacy were a series of successful experiments to improve the effectiveness of underwater torpedoes or mines and to supervise the creation of torpedo defenses. The Confederate government sent him abroad in 1862 to acquire supplies, ships, and technology. He was in England when the war ended. After the war, Morey left England for Mexico, where he became Commissioner of Immigration in the government of Emperor Maximilian of Mexico. In that role, he tried to persuade other former Confederates, including Robert E. Lee, to immigrate to Mexico and form a new Virginia that would salvage the attributes of the South's plantation society, especially the exploitation of unfree, non-white labor. On January 16, 1929, the Alexandria School Board voted to name Matthew Morey Elementary School. Naming buildings and streets after members of the Confederacy was just one way in which the city and city council rejected integration following the Civil War.
Great. So thank you so much to our communications staff who put together that video. I just want to say that tonight, as a school board member, I'm here to listen to the voices from our community. And I know that I see that there are some other school board members who are listening in. So I'm going to turn it over now to Fran to ask the first question.
Okay, thank you, Michelle. So the first question that we're going to propose tonight is going to be, what's in a name and how can a name promote pride? And can a name invoke harmful memories? When you're ready to answer the question, you're going to go to the bottom of your screen and hit the participants button. And a list is going to show up. At the bottom right-hand corner, there's a spot for you to click to raise your hand. And we'll call on you in the order in which you raised your hand. We're going to allow for 10 minutes per question, and we're going to call on people in order. If there's something that you'd like to add, or if you don't feel comfortable speaking online, please use the Q&A button at the bottom to submit questions or comments, and we'll share those as time allows. So if anyone would like to answer, if you could just hit the raise hand feature and we will call on you in order. And again, the first question is, what's in a name? Can a name promote pride? And can a name invoke harmful memories?
I see we have quite a number of participants watching, so I just want to encourage everyone not to be shy, that this is an open forum where we would love to hear everyone's point of view. So I encourage you to raise your hand and just jump right in.
So we have a number of people that are just joining. So just to review again, we're just going to be taking some, we're just going to be posing some questions today for the community to answer and to give your feedback. We encourage the kids of Maury who might be on the call to answer questions. You're just going to use the participant feature, and at the bottom there's a spot to click your hand to raise your hand. And the first question that we are promoting is on the screen. It's, what's in a name? And can we promote, can a name promote pride? And can a name invoke harmful memories?
Well, I don't see anyone raising their hand for this question. So, you know, I will just say that, not to answer the question, but one of the things that helps me think about how to answer this question is to think about names, like names in my own family. You know, of course, I'm a parent of 3 children. And so, you know, picking your child's name is very important. So just thinking about that process of naming things and, you know, what motivates you to choose a particular name. If I don't see any hands, we might just move on to the second question, because perhaps we might have some folks who are more interested in answering the second question. Okay, I see a couple of people raising their hand for this one. So I'll just go ahead and read the second question here. What is the most important community value that should be considered when deciding to change or not change the name of a school? And I see Richard Westfall. And so I believe you will be moved over, Mr. Westfall, to our panelist side so that you are able to speak and everyone can hear you. So we'll just give a second for that to happen.
Hi, it's the Westfall family, and Jameson and Patrick and Rick and I, we would like to say
we were kind of answering the first question, was just that we think that a name should be equitable to everyone in our community, so it shouldn't make someone feel like they're not part of our school community.
Thank you. Sarah Shackelford.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Hi. Yes, the question is, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question one more time?
I think we're going back to what's in a name? Can a name apply? And can a name invoke harmful memories?
I believe a name can invoke harmful memories, whether or not you know, the people involved happen to be around at the time that a school or place was named. These names have meanings and they have memories, and they can evoke emotions. And I think that as a community, we need to stop and consider why places were given the names that they were. Would we take those same names today? Do we owe it to our community to stop and take that some broader context and think about how names that were chosen, perhaps by just one subset might affect other members of the community?
Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. We do have a comment from the Q&A from Tim Doyle, and he says, I have mixed feelings about whether or not Matthew Morey Elementary School, but believe that our efforts to educate students about Matthew Morey should be complete and accurate. In my opinion, the video at the link in October 16th edition of Mariner Messenger fell short of this. Most certainly, it would not be inaccurate to teach Morey without mentioning his Southern nationalism and white supremacist beliefs. However, it is incomplete to summarize his numerous contributions to both the nation and humanity with a mere sentence. He was an oceanographer who had helped to make the seas safer for a nation. This is all the video has to say about a man who is considered to be the father of oceanography. Additionally, Morey was the first superintendent of the Naval Observatory. He was instrumental in the founding of Naval Academy, determining the route of the first transatlantic telegraph cable and the establishment of the National Weather Service. Thank you. Pam Vitrini.
Hi, I was asked to prepare a few remarks and I wasn't quite sure when to do that, so I'm going to do it now because this comment in the Q&A sort of lends itself to my research that I've done a lot of research on Matthew Morey, and I just wanted to speak to that for just a minute. I want to start by saying that I'm very grateful to Dr. Hutchings and the school board for taking on this project. I'm grateful to the nearly 200 members of our community who signed the petition, many of whom are probably on this tonight. And I'd also like to thank Fran, our fearless PTA leader, Ms. Reef, Ms. Borges, and Ms. Hughes for participating in this discussion and hosting. I'm a Morey parent. I have a kindergartner and a third grader at Morey, and I've been interested in Matthew Fontaine Morey since we moved to the neighborhood 8 years ago. I was a history major in college, and sometimes I geek out over historical figures, and Morey proved to be quite interesting in my research. Sometimes the legend we create doesn't tell the whole story. For instance, did you know that Matthew Morey, the great mariner, suffered from seasickness? That's not the only part of Morey's story that we neglect to tell. I've learned that the legend of Matthew Morey deserves some scrutiny. There are two things that I focused on when studying Matthew Morey. I wanted to understand his place in the Confederacy, and I wanted to understand the significance of his name being chosen for our school. In the early 1900s, a picture was painted of Matthew Morey by the Daughters of the Confederacy.
Excuse me, Pam. I'm sorry. I just wanted to encourage you to slow down because we do have interpreters, and I think they're having a hard time keeping up with the translation.
Okay,
so.
I totally understand. I'm going to go back one paragraph and slow down.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry about that, interpreters. I'm a Morey parent. I have a kindergartner and a third grader at Morey, and I've been interested in Matthew Fontaine Morey since we moved to the neighborhood 8 years ago. I was a history major in college, and sometimes I geek out over historical figures, and Morey proved to be quite interesting in my research. Sometimes the legend we create doesn't tell the whole story. For instance, did you know that Matthew Morey, the great mariner, suffered from seasickness? That's not the only part of Morey's story that we neglect to tell. I've learned that the legend of Matthew Morey deserves some scrutiny. There are two things that I focused on when studying Matthew Morey. I wanted to understand his place in the Confederacy, and I wanted to understand the significance of his name being chosen for our school. In the early 1900s, a picture was painted of Matthew Morey by the Daughters of the Confederacy, with the publishing of propaganda booklets that emphasized his accomplishments in oceanography and labeled him as a great scientist and global humanitarian. Upon further inspection, historians have noted that he was also a quote-unquote pro-slavery internationalist. He attempted to negotiate a slave trade from the United States to Brazil, and he tried to create a new Virginia colony in Mexico after the Civil War, where slave labor would continue with a new label of indentured servitude. He convinced nearly 4,000 Confederate soldiers to defect before his plan was thwarted by unrest in Mexico. When he joined the Confederacy at the start of the Civil War, his economic ideas that united the slaveholding American South with South America emboldened the Confederacy with the financial confidence to secede. Morey also invented an early version of the torpedo that sunk Union ships during the Civil War and went to Europe to lobby for the Confederacy. In the 1920s, the cult of the lost cause led to a Jim Crow era South that rejected integration and glorified members of the Confederacy. Matthew Morey's name was plucked from Civil War history at this time, and things were named after him as his statue was raised on Richmond's Monument Avenue. On January 16, 1929, Matthew Morey Elementary was named by an unelected school board who did not engage with the community to find a name for the school. In the minutes from the naming meeting, the notes read, quote, moved, seconded, and agreed that the new Rosemont X School building be named Morey after Matthew Fontaine Morey. There was no substantive discussion or community engagement as evidenced in the minutes from that meeting. The name that was chosen specifically to emphasize the South's intention to remain segregated and to honor the lost cause would stick for nearly 100 years. If anyone is interested in citations or links from any of this information or information that was presented in the petition, please post it in the comments or email me and I will send it to you. I just wanted to share more information. There are obviously lots of different parts of his character and accomplishments, but these are two things that I focused on, his involvement in the Confederacy and why his name was chosen for our school. Thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, thank you. I want to just thank you both for those comments, Pam, and also the comment that you read from the Q&A, Fran. I think that we can see that Matthew Morey was a complex individual that had many facets to him, and I appreciate you both sharing those perspectives and that information about him with us. Now we're going to move on to the second question, which is, what is the most important community value that should be considered when deciding to change or not change the name of a school? So if you could just raise your hand if you would like to answer this question. Okay, I see Far Quinn.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, so I think to me, the last thing, I believe is Pamela, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just the last thing that she said to me is what in our community I think we should be thinking about is if the intention of the name initially was to maintain segregation and that is no longer our intention, then we should change the name. I think, like you said, humans are complex, but if the intention originally was to maintain a segregated school system, then that clearly makes a clear argument to me that the name should be changed.
Thank you. I also see that we have a comment in the Q&A, which I'll read. It says, "Hi, I think in names there's so much in terms of identity. As a citizen in Alexandria, I think names say a lot about who we are. We're a diverse community, and names of Confederate buildings need to be," whoops, I lost my place. Excuse me. The chat started moving when I was reading. "Names of Confederate buildings need to reflect who we are now. We're a community who welcomes diversity and need to move away from the past. Whenever I think of names that reflect segregation in the past, it's very sad and unwelcoming." So thank you for that comment. And I see Pam has her hand up. Did you want to comment on this question?
This comment is from my son, James, who's a 3rd grader at Maury.
Does the name of our elementary school affect people's feelings, specifically sad, angry, lonely, and mistreated?
Okay, thank you for that comment. Is there anyone else who would like to raise their hand to make a comment or to answer this question here? What is the most important community value that should be considered when deciding to change or not change the name of a school? I see another comment online that the most important thing is to reflect who we are now and not the past. And I also see a hand by Xavier Perry.
I wanted to answer the question. I'm in 5th grade. I'm new at Maury. I wanted to say I feel that the most important community value is that nobody feels like the name is really discouraging or has a past that's not quite, inclusive. And I just feel like the most important community value is that either it's a name that's uplifting or after somebody that we should honor, or it's just a name.
Okay, thank you so much. It's so terrific to hear from the students at Maury Elementary School. Is there anybody else who'd like to answer this question? I see another comment in the Q&A. I agree with earlier comments that the most important values to consider are inclusion and equity, and that's why, as a Maury parent, I fully support changing the name. Okay. I don't see any other hands, so should we move along to the next question, Fran?
Yes. So the next question is, which of your personal beliefs is weighing most heavily as you contemplate the decision to change or not change the 2 school names? And today we're going to be talking about Maury, of course.
Right. So the previous question was asking about the community values, and this is asking about for you to reflect on your personal beliefs. When you think about changing this name, what are some of your personal beliefs that are impacting how you feel about this particular issue?
Hi, I'm Giselle again. I think the biggest thing for me is that everyone should feel included and feel like they matter. And I think when you have a name, I fully support changing the name, by the way. When you have a name that's past was negative or meant to harm others, or that type of group of people was more superior, then that's not okay, because right now, that hearing the name of the school and now knowing the past, it actually makes me feel sad, and I don't want other people to feel badly and feel like they're less than. And I think that names are important and it should reflect something positive that supports the whole community.
Thank you, Giselle. Would anyone else like to comment, either in the Q&A or by raising hands?
All right, well, I'm not seeing any other comments at this time. I did want to let you know that on the ACPS website, if you search for the Identity Project, there's a section there about Matthew Morey Elementary and a little bit about when the school was founded and how it was named. And one thing that I thought was really neat is the school board minutes from 1929, which are handwritten in cursive writing, which I don't know if many of our students would recognize today. But the cursive writing, and it basically says that, you know, the school board voted to change the name to Matthew Morey, and they were, or that the school was being established and it was going to be named after Matthew Morey, and they were going to have an essay contest for students at the time to write an essay about Matthew Morey. So maybe we can move on to the fourth question then.
Or I think we have another comment from the Q&A that came through, and it said, I want to hear, it's from an anonymous, I want to hear from diverse voices, representatives of Black, Indigenous, and people of color at Morey. I also want to know the costs associated with the change and if it could better be utilized for under-resourced students.
Well, I can answer.
You went on mute, Michelle.
Thank you. So with regards to the cost, I do know that, as I mentioned, the school board is scheduled to vote on the name change on November 23rd. And so the superintendent will be preparing a report for the school board in advance of that meeting, and we'll be sharing all of the feedback from these community sessions with the school board, as well as what the costs are involved in renaming the school. So thank you for that question, and that information will certainly be shared with the community in the coming weeks. And I mean, to answer the other part of the question, we would love to hear from any members who would like to raise their hand and speak to this issue about which of your personal beliefs is weighing most heavily as you contemplate this decision to change the school name or not.
We have another comment in the Q&A from the Cohen family. And it's, our family feels it is important that everyone feel welcome at school. If the intention behind the name was to make certain students feel unwelcome, then we think it should be changed. We also feel it is important that we learn from and understand the past and how it affects us today and where we are going. Thank you.
Okay, not seeing any other comments. Shall we move on to the final question this evening?
Let's go.
Okay, so renaming schools is one way of reckoning with Alexandria's history. What additional actions or alternative ways should ACPS consider to achieve this? So I'll give you a minute or two to think about that. That's a very big question, I think. Renaming schools is one way of reckoning with Alexandria's history. What additional actions or alternative ways should ACPS consider to achieve this? So if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand, or you can also type an answer in the Q&A. Okay, it looks like we have a quiet group this evening. Sort of like the last call here about renaming schools is one way of reckoning with Alexandria's history. What other additional actions or alternative ways should ACPS consider to achieve this? And I do see a couple of hands here. The first is Michael Salerno and Aaron Yates.
Hello, I think to answer the question about what additional actions or alternative ways should ACPS consider achieving this, I think in our personal experience in ACPS, I think the focus really needs to be on spreading resources equitably and not necessarily equally amongst the schools, and making sure that schools that are reckoning with Alexandria's history more than others are getting more of the resources that they need.
Great, thank you for that comment. And I thought I saw another hand, but it may have, Farquin, yes.
I was going to type it, but it would take too long. I think having more of these community forums, I think I'm a teacher in ACPS as well as a parent. And I think when we can create more community and dialogue with each other, it helps to create more equity when people can get to know each other. I also think to piggyback off the last comment, funding is certainly an issue with the way that our school district is zoned. I think there are schools where the funding is different, if only for the PTA funds that are provided. I haven't looked in the exact numbers, but I know that PTA funding can really shift a school's funding. So those would be the alternative ways.
Great, thank you for that comment. It looks like we have a couple of comments in the Q&A. Maybe I will read one, and then Fran, would you like to read the second one after me? So the first comment here I see says that ACPS needs to create curriculum that allows discussions about inclusion, and that we value diversity and agree that we need equal opportunities among the schools across the city.
And the next is from an anonymous attendee. We would be interested in hearing about the costs associated with renaming the school, and if these funds could be used to achieve equity for students in the school system. We think families should be able to consider that information when weighing whether to rename the school. Would you like, and then we have another one from Nathan Masick. None of your questions asked whether the name of Matthew Morey should be retained. From my perspective as a resident and parent of a Morey student, the school should not be named for a white supremacist. Hopefully, this will be clear to ACPS, management, and the elected leadership, and they will act with all due haste to vote to change the name and facilitate conversations about a new, more inclusive name for the school.
Great. Well, thank you for that comment. And as I mentioned at the top of our conversation, we do have a survey right now that is available for people to submit feedback, and that will be open through Wednesday evening at midnight. And then this Thursday at 4:00 p.m. during our school board meeting, we will be having a public hearing on renaming. And so I encourage you to, if you would like to submit your comments at that time, we would certainly welcome through the survey or through the public hearing. You can sign up for the public hearing on our ACPS website under the school board meetings tab. I don't see any other hands at this time. I don't know, Fran, is there anything else you would like to say?
We actually had a couple, questions that were posed by the attendees that they would like to put up for discussion as well.
Great.
And one of those, and I'll just kind of it was two that were very similar, so I'm just going to try to put them both together. And it's, how do you think renaming the school will impact the students? Is there going to be a negative impact or positive impact, and what ways do we think that that will show?
Okay, is there anybody that would like to raise your hand and answer that question? That's a question for the community. Fran, would you like to read that question one more time?
Basically, it was, how do you think renaming the school will impact our students and our community, either negatively or positively?
I feel like renaming the school will impact students positively because it shows that we do not support views of another person who was racist or white supremacist, and will help to make everyone feel included and that ACPS supports a very diverse community.
Thank you, Giselle.
Not seeing any other hands or comments. Anything else, Fran?
Just a reminder that the last day of the survey is this Wednesday, October 28th at midnight. We encourage everyone to go to the homepage of the ACPS website to make sure that your views are heard. The school, Mr. Powell's been working with all the teachers to educate our students on the history, and they've been going through that for the past number of weeks. So we encourage you to talk to your students about what they've learned, and go to the website and give us feedback. Patrick Carr has his hand raised.
Thank you. My name is Ann Carr, and I went to Matthew Morey for 6 years. I believe that renaming the school will indeed have a positive impact because the students, like Giselle said, the students will know that they actually do, they actually are being cared about, and that the school will not just keep what's in the past, and they will be willing to move on into the present.
Thank you, Pat. Thank you.
It looks like there's also a comment from Alex that says, I think it will be more positive. Students will be able to discuss why the school was renamed. It will definitely teach everyone that we have moved away from the past. So thank you for that comment. Are there any other comments? I want to make sure I'm not missing any. I don't think so. Maybe we can take it to the last slide now. And again, here is some of the information that we talked about. We do have a final community conversation happening on Wednesday evening. And again, I really want to encourage folks to go to the Identity Project website. At the beginning of this process, we had a series of community read-ins with Doug Reed, a professor at Georgetown University, who wrote a book called Building the Federal Schoolhouse. And it's all about the history of our city and the history of our school system. And so it's very informative. And if folks haven't had a chance to check that out, I really encourage you to do that. And I just really want to thank everyone for participating tonight. I'd like to thank Fran as the co-moderator, Giselle for the introductions, our translators, all of the people working behind the scenes to make this run smoothly, and all of the students and families for participating this evening. I really, really want the students who are participating to know that we really, really enjoyed hearing your voices, and that your civic engagement, that means you being involved in the decisions that are made in your community, is so very important. And so we really thank you for participating tonight. And at this time, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Hutchings, who would like to say some closing remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Reif. And I do want to just echo what you just mentioned about our panelists for all the work that you all have done, and just talking today, about this discussion. I just want to say that it is so informative to learn so much about Matthew Morey. I mean, I learned something today just by hearing about this history that many in our community, many people in our community were just not aware of. And as we embark on this identity project, I really just commend the school board as well as our school community for taking this on and really saying, let's educate and have discussions about our schools of concern so that we can actually do something about it. And then finally, I just want to thank Mr. Powell also, who was our principal at Matthew Morey, for leading these efforts as well as for leading the school, especially during this global pandemic. I know how difficult it has been. I'm speaking to superintendent, but I just know you have challenges as well as the principal, and just keep pushing forward as you have been. So I appreciate that. But that concludes my comments. I look forward to our session on Wednesday, and I hope that everyone will tune in on October the 28th for our final community conversation.
Okay, good night, everyone.
Good night.